Let's begin. Okay, good morning to all our viewers out there. It's a lovely Tuesday morning here in Paarl. It's a massive honor for us to sit here with Natie Ferreira at Dagga Farmacy. He's a very renowned figure in the industry, and most of you out there will know him. So thank you very much for joining us here today, Natie.
Thanks, Albertus. Yeah, no, it's a pleasure having you guys here. Great to have you on a windstill day. Also, got lovely weather, and yeah, I know it would be great to show you guys around and tell you what we're busy with here. Get you to touch some plants.
Oh yes, thank you so much. It's, as I said, it's a massive honor for us to come see it in person. We're going to go through a couple of questions today and find out what's happening here and what it's all about. I think to start off, for the people out there that aren't familiar with you and with Dagga Farmacy, can you just give us a brief little introduction?
Yeah, but my background is in ornamental horticulture. I come from a landscaping and nursery background, so I opened and ran wholesale and retail nurseries. I was quite a well-known landscaper in the Cape.
Just the Tomato brand, eh?
I later on used the Tomato brand for that. The Tomato brand was where we actually later on moved into what we called foodscaping, where we completely focused on landscaping with food. I was initially involved quite a bit in Babylon Storen when they set up that, where I got actually introduced to a lot more. I learned a lot there too, from landscaping with edible plants. So, and not only edible plants, functional plants. So we also had mediscaping as a concept and so on. And that was about 8 years ago already. I was into that. But before that, I mean, so I was really into landscaping and in small scale farming, because we had a lot of farmers, a lot of clients, rather discreet high-end clients that had these weekend farms out in the country. So we would do their whole farming. We would cultivate their 50 olive trees and then have it pressed for oil and then delivered to them labeled olive oil, and that kind of service we offered. So I got exposed to, through my clients, to a very, very wide range of cultivation practices, because they all had their interests. So one client would be into biodynamic farming, another client would know a lot about permaculture and want to get into that. Another farmer would have a friend who's on the Royal Soil Association of Britain and wants her compost done a very specific way, and things like that. So I had to go and learn a lot of that, and then get myself involved. So I mean, I ended up on the Biodynamic Agriculture Association's board eventually, but all basically funded by my clients and driven by my curiosity. So through that I got exposed to a lot, but my interest has always been in the reproduction of plants, to produce healthy, good-looking plants to the industry, because we had retail nurseries. And we would do plant displays. We were very, very good at expos and doing elaborate plant displays at expos. So healthy plants sort of came naturally for me, always. And then cannabis came about. Apart from my love and my personal relationship with cannabis, which really goes back to when I was 14. And that's a story maybe for another day when we talk about the whole thing about kids and cannabis and the damage that it might and will do or can't do, and of course people say it does. But anyway, so my own history goes back a long time. But apart from that, with the previous company that I was involved with in this high-end landscaping and small-scale farming industry, had a very big appetite and I think also guilt-driven social responsibility aspect to that, and I basically carried that. So I was involved with the, and also again I could try some new innovative ways to do things. So I would disrupt our entire our labor chain by forming the people into little cooperatives and then enabling them, and do other supply chain disruption activities and really go and find projects to get people working and do that. So I was always involved. And then when I started to hear about hemp, and I mean I was a novice in about hemp, I knew cannabis a little bit, but I mean not really that much. I thought that could be an answer to a lot of our socioeconomic problems around our cities, and we were at that stage specifically involved with the transition process of the ex-forestry land around our areas, because we've got thousands of hectares of ex-SAFCOL forestry land where they had 7 to 8 harvests of pine trees and gum trees since the 1920s to today. So the soil is completely depleted. Nobody can plant nothing there again. Now they want to give it back to those communities who's been ripped apart. There's no more work for them, and say, here's land for you. There's a concept of agroforestry, or there's a concept of permaculture, there's a concept of pig farming or something. You go make it work, which is almost impossible. There's very little water, there's no irrigation. But anyway, at that stage, we've heard, I saw the memes on Facebook, that this plant can be grown anywhere without water, without irrigation, without fertilizer.
You can replenish your soil.
Yes. So, and that's what got me onto hemp.
What if I told you that there was a miracle plant? One that had over 25,000 uses, from rope to clothes to concrete to medicine. A plant that grew quick and tall, that dug its roots deep into the dirt and sequestered tons of carbon back into the soil while sucking up polluting metals back out of it. Could you guess what it is? I'll give you a hint. It's been demonized for its association with its cousin, weed. That's right, this miracle plant is hemp. Hemp, a non-psychoactive strain of the cannabis plant, seems like it can do everything. It's one of the fastest growing plants on the planet. It's able to sequester 15 tons of carbon dioxide into the soil per hectare and crowds out weeds to such an extent that very little herbicide is needed to grow it successfully. When implemented in a crop rotation, hemp can be a boon to farmers. Indeed, the Rodale Institute found in their hemp cover crop trials that yields of soybean and wheat increased in the next year while weed pressure dwindled. This might be in part due to the plant's ability to pull heavy metals like cadmium and lead out of the soil while aerating the subsoil with its root system, ultimately leaving a healthier soil for the next plant. In short, hemp's impact on the soil is minimal while also sequestering a massive amount of carbon in a very short period of time. But hemp's benefits don't end on the farm. As I mentioned earlier, according to the USDA, it has over 25,000 uses. Its seeds are nutrient dense and can be eaten raw or made into milk or oils. Its stalks can be used to make fiber that's stronger, more absorbent, more durable, and better insulating than cotton. And if clothing isn't what you need, then you can make hemp paper or even hemp concrete. That's right, concrete. When you mix the wooden refuse from the hemp fiber making process with a lime-based binder and water, you get a hardened substance similar to traditional concrete. As a result, a meter squared area of hempcrete can sequester up to 16 kilograms of CO2 equivalent over its life cycle. And all of this is just the tip of the iceberg. There are many more applications like insulation that can be made from hemp.
And I very quickly learned. So I was lucky, I got my hands on some hemp seed from various places, and I could start to grow it. And I not only grew it in my own garden, but I also grew it in my clients' gardens, especially when the Constitutional Court ruling came out. I convinced them that they're allowed. So I showed my clients how to juice. The more sophisticated clients got themselves proper juicers. We were juicing hemp, and while we were doing that, I was just getting to learn and know more and more about this plant and all the properties. And quickly learned that for the Western Cape, it's not the answer. This is actually a very difficult place to grow hemp in.
Yes.
Because of the wind, because of our water situation. We're in a summer rainfall area, in a winter rainfall area. It is 100% a summer rainfall crop. You will not be able. So I've learned of the shortcomings of hemp too, but it got me a big interest in the plant. So I'm still very much involved on the genetic side to see where we can enhance those properties that we're after.
Get the ideal strain to
get those,
grow big fibers.
And for our local conditions, because we're in a very special latitude. I mean, there's that concept where they've actually just drawn the globe wrong. The whole concept of the globe is viewed from the top down. So if we look at Africa, we, compared to Europe, we're actually very close to the equator. If you look at London, for instance, it's 1,000 kilometers further north than what we are south to just get to that latitude. And they're still quite far south. I mean, you get way more north. So we sit with a massive difference in latitudes, in climates, in conditions that will take years to develop in South Africa, to develop those specific strains.
I see.
Yeah, we sit, I mean, and that's what I've also then learned, because I had to also jump from farming at what was mostly a horticultural scale, small scale, into big agriculture. When we start to talk with big farmers and see how industry works and start to talk with agricultural economists, and you look at an industry like the soybean industry, which is just soybeans. I think it took us 17 years before we got our first exports of soybeans.
With soybeans, it takes time to develop.
An industry like that. And people were jumping on hemp, and they were thinking that you can do it overnight. With very little money. Also,
like that,
you see these proposals for millions don't add up. Millions of rands don't add up. I mean, 70 million rand, 100 million rands is not a lot of money if you talk hemp and cannabis development. And that's what people, you're talking billions of rands that would be needed in South Africa to develop an industrial hemp industry. I really say we can play around with genetics, and I think that's very, very important. The agronomic research that's being done by the ARC and the private sector is what we should focus on now. And then enable small-scale technological development so that we can try and get a hold of the IP around it. But we would need a Sasol-scale project in South Africa to really ignite the hemp industry, where we would say, listen, R1 trillion. I mean, that's what Energen spent on their gas plant. They haven't produced any clean hydrogen, and they're producing very little liquid nitrogen, liquid natural gas there, and they've spent R1 trillion on that plant in the Free State. And that's the kind of investment that I see we need in bioprocessing and refinery, basically a big biorefinery plant, where all these 20,000 products that we brag about on TikTok and Facebook and all that can be shown to the world.
My name is Jan Slasky. I am a principal researcher responsible for hemp and cannabis portfolio. It's the only one of its kind facility in the world. This long fiber, bast fiber, is very, very strong. So you cannot break this fiber.
So that is, long story there. I don't know. There were other questions in that. I mean,
that's perfect.
Dagga Farmacy. So what we're doing here? I were very, very lucky. I was positioned in places where I got my hands onto some great genetics in cannabis. What we believed were great. We didn't even know. But we believe this thing, at least it's powdery mildew resistant, it's quite vigorous. A grower claims 500-600 grams per plant outdoor. We want to keep that. And we quickly learned how to effectively keep plants in their vegetative state, how to propagate them, how to keep our plants healthy and alive while vegetating. So we keep lights on. We've worked it out. We do a combination of covered and full outdoor growing. We do most of our propagation indoors. And we then build up a network through which we started to supply people with plants. We came up with a word adoption, where you would really just pay for our cultivation fees, and you would adopt the plant from us, because we always have too many. We were like a plant sanctuary, because really that's what we are. We also became like a mother bank, where people would say, really, this genetic is so good, but I just don't have space to veg a mother. Can you please keep this mother alive for us?
Okay.
And then I said, well, under one condition, I'll distribute it to my network. Then you share. Otherwise you pay. You either pay per month or you share that genetic.
I must say it's a beautifully unique structure, whereas most of the clubs I've been at, the member isn't really involved in the cultivation process.
No.
Whereas here, you don't just get the end product, you don't just get the flower, you actually encourage the member to go and form a relationship with the plant and do the cultivation process themselves, which I find very unique. And
yeah, but there's very few of our Grow Club members actually would ever smoke our end product flower, because our flower that we produce is really surplus out of our research. And some flower that I get from my shared empowerment projects. But that our private club where we would share flower with someone is really so small. We encourage people to grow.
Yes.
So our club is 100% to protect and create a network about the plant itself, to get people to grow at home. So before we would even contemplate you joining our private club, you have to be a full Grow Club member, which means that you have at least adopted one plant from us and took it home and tried to grow it. Yeah. And there's a whole WhatsApp group and very cheap nutrients and lots of support around that to get you to grow. And a lot of people just can't. And we try to just, very informally keep record of that and say, listen, those plants, I mean, they've been through the mill, and then we will look at sharing our flower with them. Because that is really not our focus in this focus of what we're doing here. Our focus is on the plants.
To establish good genetics, good growers, and good ethics around working with the plant.
Yeah. And our network is, what's nice about the club network is that we now have a network of real enthusiasts, so people that understand genetics and are willing to spend a lot of money on it, that are now bringing that to the club. And saying, listen, let you guys rather germinate it, hunt through them, find the good phenos, and then start distributing the cuttings. And then, so we've got a deal where some guys then get a discount on those cuts, or we'll pay them a little bit of a royalty if it's their own creation. Like there's some local breeders that we've seen coming up with some interesting things. Yes. But we can discuss that also in our walkthrough just now. Yeah,
definitely. So it's beautiful to see that you had your hands in the ground for all these years, and eventually we had the 2018 ruling where it's now legal to grow privately, and it just gained momentum up until this Dagga Farmacy. I know you're a lecturer at Chiba, Africa, right?
Yes, well, I was lucky. I mean, the plant taught me a lot. I mean, I probably put me in a position where the plant could teach me. But it did. So we became quite clever, some of us, in this world of people that don't know a lot. So, and I was willing to share always what I've learned. I mean, as far as what I've learned and what I've read and what I sort of could fish out, all the information out there, was always willing to share. And
yes, I see you very active
and I had a big interest in the educational aspect, and then Chiba came around.
Hello, welcome to another webinar. This time we are doing a webinar on hemp and hemp genetics, seeds, sourcing, where it all comes from. I know in South Africa we've had a bit of a tough time the last 2 years in terms of making sure that this industry starts to move forward. We're not alone. It's a challenge globally at the moment, so we're going to unpack some of those nuances that go into sourcing seeds, what kind of genetics you need, etc. We've got a whole panel of people coming on, and then we've got a chat first with a comrade of ours from Argentina. But this webinar is brought to you by Chiba Cannabis Academy and Friends of Hemp South Africa. Friends of Hemp South Africa is a non-profit organization set up to try and advance the hemp industry. So this session is about education. We will take questions at the end. There are no stupid questions. Well, there are some stupid questions, so don't ask a stupid question. But great. I think I'm going to start with you, Ayanda, and just appreciate there are all different kinds of levels of people on this webinar. So, what is a hemp genetic, and why is it important? What is the definition of a hemp genetic? You could maybe start with that, Ayanda.
So I think maybe and I'm not an agronomist, so maybe Natie is probably the better person to answer this. But I mean, effectively, what we're talking about here is not really a distinction between sort of what is hemp and cannabis, or just importantly that basically we're talking about the same things. It's sort of if you imagined that all of us who are on this call, who are of different shapes and sizes, are all of the Homo sapiens species, but we all look different, we sound different, we have different kinds of features, both that you see and others that you don't necessarily see. And so genetics and the varietals and cultivars are effectively those things where you have cannabis for different types of end uses. So some cultivars of varieties of cannabis are bred to be very, very rich in fiber because they're used for those particular end applications. Whereas other might be very useful for grain, for example, and give you lots of seeds. So what you have is basically quite a variety when it comes to hemp, and it's always very important to match the cultivar to an end use because that's effectively the kind of characteristics that that kind of species is endowed with. So you're looking to sort of maximize those things, obviously, for your output markets. So that's a very sort of non-scientific way of explaining what a cultivar is. But hopefully it's helpful to some of those of us who don't come from that scientific background.
We'll get some science from Natie, and I've got a section where we're going to actually unpack, the uses, because essentially it's very important that the output is determines the input. Natie, you've been dealing with seeds for many years. What's your kind of definition of a hemp genetic? Why is it important?
Trenton, I can't give you a scientific answer for this because there's no science in this definition at all. The definition at the moment is there by prohibition. So we've got a limit of an active substance in a plant determining now the genetic of the plant. So if the plant stays below 0.2% THC in South Africa at the moment, it is still hemp. And the moment it goes above that, it's either medicinal or just Dagga. And it's then governed by different laws. So that is a problem. So we found, obviously, all over the world that this prohibition of hemp has forced the genetics in certain directions where people were forced to breed in these low THC genetics. But it was often detrimental to the other properties of the plant. And we found, that really we find better qualities in the plants where we find some higher THC too. Better pest resistance, better growth, vigor. Maybe it is also because of our latitude, which is completely different. But we find much better results out of our landrace genetics, for instance, where we cannot apply that definition. I cannot in South Africa even call it hemp because it is above that 0.2% level. The moment I test it a few weeks into flower, early in flower, like we're supposed to test, at the moment, 15 days after flower, I do hit those low levels, so then it is still hemp by definition. But there is really no botanical science in that definition.
So I was involved with them right from the beginning. We've got some products that we bring to the market together. We've got a 3-day commercial cannabis cultivation course, a 1-day commercial workshop, sort of like a bridging course that we do. And we're developing various other products.
Sorry, where does that get hosted?
We actually have one starting tomorrow, in Cape Town. We're doing that at Spear at the... not Biodiversity Centre, but something like that. Sorry, I got
No, that's
cool.
right here in Cape Town.
It's at Spear in Stellenbosch,
Okay.
We're doing that. They visit here too, and then we do one in Joburg also at Jazz Farm.
All right.
Yeah, we had one last month.
Wonderful.
We try to do 3 or 4 a year in each location.
Okay.
So that's also for me important. And then to put this business together, initially when people started to bring me genetics, and I started to learn about hemp, for me, I couldn't continue without knowing what's in the plant. So